Well, we'd like to call to order the Setzler Subcommittee of Judiciary and Non-Civil. And do we have anybody that's logged in remotely that's going to participate?
That's right.
Okay. I do think we'll have one member. Okay. Welcome. We do have some folks remotely here. Again, for those of you who are following the committee, HB 993 has been withdrawn from consideration at the request of the author. So it's he wants to continue the conversations and do some more work on 993 before we consider it. But we are going to have before us today House Bill 1391. And with that, Chair, I'd like to recognize Representative Gunter to present the bill. Welcome.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, House Bill 1391 is a bill that puts the public defender and assistant public defenders on the same pay scale as the DA and assistant DAs. And that's really what it does. When I was in the Public Safety Subcommittee of Appropriations hearing yesterday, the public defenders made a presentation and I asked the question, what is their starting pay for an assistant public defender? And they said 50,000. And I was just talking with Mr. Skandalakis with Prosecuting Attorneys Council, and I think that's the starting pay for ADAs as well. So I think they're on the same pay scale. And but I'm looking at section 2 here in my bill, which I'm just getting familiar with, by the way. I see where the change is. It's in paragraph 4. For a public defender 4, it goes from 90% to 95%. That was the change there. And I think under law, these have probably not been updated as to what the budget is paying for those starting salaries.
And that's another question. If there's been a change by rule that allows that to happen, I want to delve into this and get it right, understand where we need to be with this. There's some cleanup. Again, this is a subcommittee. So as a subcommittee, we can be a little less formal sometimes about how we approach these things.
Yeah.
But with that, there's a sign up list. I'm going to recognize some folks. Anything else, or do you want to stand by?
Well, one other thing I want to say is that there's good reason for paying the public defender a good salary, is because they're a huge part of the criminal justice system. And you want good people in those positions. We're not paying enough money to any of these, the DAs or the public defenders, really. But you know, this is a way of hopefully getting some good people in those positions. And that's all I have. Thank you.
So functionally, where this operates is we're locking the circuit. Essentially the circuit defender is tied to the same as the DA, and then the assistant circuit defenders are all tied to them. That's just how that
right.
That structures out.
From what I heard in that hearing with the Public Safety Subcommittee was they're getting paid that way now. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Well, stay close. And with that, looks like we've got Pete Skandalakis from PAC. Yep. And Mr. Poston as well. Okay, come on up. Gentlemen, welcome. Just tell us who you are and who you represent, and you've got the floor.
Chairman Setzler, I'm Pete Skandalakis. It's always an honor to be in front of this committee. I appreciate it. And with me is Bert Postenberg. Bert is a district attorney from the Conasauga Circuit. He's also on our council, the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, and he also serves as our budget chair.
And is no stranger to this committee. So welcome back.
So I will let Bert begin talking about 1391.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We're here not to advocate for or oppose the bill. I think I put neutral down on the sign-in sheet. It's our position, and I've talked to a number of other DAs, that what the legislature chooses to pay other state officials is not our concern. If you're not taking money out of our budget to do it, that's a public policy decision, what's best for the state of Georgia, and that's your decision to make. So we just want to be here as a resource to answer any questions, describe our job duties as they relate to what the public defenders do, and things like that might help you make that decision. I would point out there was a judicial district attorney and circuit public defender compensation commission several years ago issued a report December of 2016. We can provide that report to any members of the committee that wanted to, that looked at some of these issues, relative pay, looked at state pay versus the county supplements, and just, it's a very complicated, as you know, it's a very complicated situation as it relates specifically to the DA versus public defender pay. That commission did recommend that their recommendation was basically that existing DAs and public defenders that wanted to stay in the current system with their current county supplements be allowed to do so, but that any that wanted to switch over to a new system, or any newly elected or appointed officials go into a system that there were no supplements, but I think it was $160,000 salary for the two positions that would be equal between the two positions. So that's the last time any real study or commission was done looking at it. So we'd point that out. There are a number of differences in the jobs. I work very closely with public defender's office and in my circuit, obviously, and we agree with what was said, that we're all underpaid, and we have no opposition to them getting a pay raise. They deserve it for the work that they do. In addition to the differences between, which I can go into as much detail as you want me to, but in addition to the differences between the DA and the public defender, of course, there are vast differences between different DA's offices in the state, and yet we receive the same salary regardless of whether you're the DA in Atlanta or the DA in a very small rural circuit. So these are complicated issues, and we just want to be here as a resource for y'all.
I'll certainly take some questions from committee members. I've got a couple myself. So before I dive in, are there any questions from members of the committee? Any questions? Any questions from online members? At a high level, do we do better to not have this in statute? Do we do better? And I know as we've drawn this, we're in essence tying the circuit defender's salary to the DA salary, which is not defined here. We do have these minimum salary ranges in section 2. Stepping back from this, do we have the right balance? Just listing these things in statute, which are perennially out of date. Would there be value in doing otherwise? I mean, what's the what perhaps as a distillation of what that commission wrestled with and came up with? What would your conclusion be? Are we do we need to think about putting something in statute? How do we wrestle with that?
I guess you're asking connecting it in statute as opposed to just dealing with it annually as part of the appropriation process. And I don't know the answer to that. One thing I would had a question about, and Pete and I were just talking about it, is as to the assistant DA and assistant public defender pay scales. We've long advocated that those be the same. The assistant DA pay scale is set by the Prosecuting Attorney's Council, and there's statutory authorization for the council to set that pay scale. So if you then connect the assistant public defender pay scale statutorily to the assistant DA pay scale, you essentially delegated the job of defining the assistant public defender pay scale to the Prosecuting Attorney's Council,
Right,
indirectly.
Right.
And so I'm not sure how that works when we're different branches of government and all that you got a judicial branch agency setting its pay scale, and then another agency's employees pay scale is matching that by
Right.
statute. I don't know how that would work exactly.
Well, if you did that, you could conceivably have a circumstance where, a particular jurisdiction is traveling under a very generous local supplement that allows the base to be artificially low. And if the local jurisdiction didn't choose to make the supplement for the defenders is lavish, you could almost be holding them down in a way, depending on how that. I don't know that plays out in reality.
And we have that issue too, even among assistant DAs, where they may come in with the same level of experience, but because one circuit can pay a higher supplement, we have assistant DAs being paid different salaries for the same work.
Right.
Yeah, from circuit to circuit. And in my circuit, public defender and I went to the county, and we've got it where they're getting the same county supplements that my assistant DAs get, but that's not true in every circuit, in every county. And it's certainly not true from circuit to circuit.
So I'm just asking, we do the messy work here in subcommittee. So, I mean, is there just as a starting premise, or do we have the right premise and statute here? Or are there things while we're in here, while we've got the car up on a lift, are there things in here we need to clean up? Is there language that needs to be addressed to address some of those inequities, or is the four corners of this bill all we need?
Mr. Chairman, I think what I would like to do is get back with my CFO, because one of the things with a salary scale is obviously every year we go in front of House Appropriations, and we have to take what is appropriated to us and obviously apply it to the assistant DAs who are working.
Right.
So if you don't have a pay scale, it's kind of hard to defend what you're paying different people. You have to have some way where you're putting people in the slots where they deserve to be, so you know what to budget and what you're trying to make ends meet.
Yeah.
So that the question you're asking is much more complicated. And I would have to talk to my CFO to see, is there a better way to do this?
Well,
Because we have struggled. I don't mind telling you, I've been on the council. Now I'm the executive director, but prior to that, I've served 3 terms on the council, and the salary pay scale has been and Bert knows because he's worked with it about 10 years, has been a struggle. How do we compensate these lawyers who come out of law school, start at 50,000?
Right. With $150,000 in debt. Perhaps.
Right. And how do we keep them? Because, and same with a public defender, an experienced lawyer, an experienced public defender, an experienced prosecutor can do a lot more work in an efficient manner and reach a just result than brand new ones.
Right.
Every time.
Right.
Yeah, you have to move them up that pay scale consistently and regularly in order to keep them. And even to recruit them. If they see that there's no steady progress, they might come and work for you a couple of years just to get the courtroom experience, but they're not going to even plan to be career prosecutors. And particularly the last 10 years, as another part of that is you can have a pay scale, but it's subject to appropriation. So if you don't get the appropriations to put people on the pay scale where they belong, then you have all kind of issues that we've been struggling with, and we're hopefully close to resolving those issues. But there's the scale on paper, and then there's what you're actually doing based on what the appropriations allow you to do. And those are have been two different things for several years.
And we realize, we'll never make what private attorneys make, what Mr. McLaurin makes. We'll never make that. We'll never get close to that. But what we do want to be able to do what we do want to be able to do is recruit and retain those experienced prosecutors who want to be in public service, and they're not penalized for being in public service.
And we want the public defenders to be able to do the same.
Same thing with public defenders. Absolutely.
True. Chair recognizes Vice Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to be back on the committee where I started out. And my apologies to the chair for any mess ups I make in mine and chairing mine. Just at the appropriate time, I move this bill do pass.
Quite to that point yet, Representative McLaurin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be back in the comfortable Shire, Hobbiton of Ed Setzler's subcommittee. I have an answer for you, believe it or not, and I'm so happy it's so clear. But the answer is that it should be in statute because it's a policy commitment, right? And statutes are where you make policy commitments. Our policy commitment is that there should be equal pay. So I think we should put it in statute. As much as Democrats would love to go through the sort of kabuki theater of starting out with a draft budget that puts defenders lower so that we can rail on you guys on Twitter so that you then equalize it. We end up in the same place, but with all the political wins, I think it's a better policy for the state of Georgia to go ahead and equalize them. So there's the 100% clear answer to your question, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you for that. You have as Joe Schroyer was a former ledge counsel. He had on his wall this famous cross stitch, and as a drafter of statutes, it was just kind of his guiding principles. It said eschew obfuscation. And you've done that. You've been very clear. So thank you. That's a very dry joke. With that, Mr. Skandalakis, and appreciate you guys. Stay close. I may have a question for you. I've got Macy Lynn Causey from Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Ms. Causey, welcome back.
Thank you, Chairman. Good to see you. So GACTO finds ourselves in a unique position when there is an agency's salary situation in question. We're obviously not a state agency, but we do have many members who are employed by the state agency and would be affected by this bill. Meaning because some of the circuit public defenders are also members of our organization. And we definitely want to stay in our lane. We're not trying to step into GPDC's lane and try to speak on behalf of them in any way, shape, or form. I just want to be real clear about that. One concern we have about this legislation is the fact that it does address one particular assistant public defender pay rate, the public defender 4, potentially, because it does increase the top end of what that position could be paid. But what it does substantially change is the pay rate of the circuit public defender. And in any context, whether private or public, raising the salary of the highest, most paid person without addressing the needs of the personnel on the front lines, if you will, it can be difficult to stomach. It can be demoralizing. And it could further, we are concerned it could further contribute to the attrition that's already happening in the agency right now. I tend to agree with Representative McLaurin about needing to codify these pay scales in the way that they are now. Unfortunately, though, because they are so out of date, we have heard, we talked to Chairman Gunter about this bill and the fact we all understand that the starting salaries are somewhere closer to $50,000, depending on where you are in the state, whether you have a supplement or not, all those variables coming into play. But when you go to the public defender's website and look at the job postings that are available today, they list the statutory scheme of pay rate. And I got to tell you, if I picked up a job application, I think the closest I would come to is this public defender 4 at this point in my career. And I saw that it started at $52,000. I wouldn't even apply, because you know what I could do? All you need to have right now is a GED. You can go down the street to the Atlanta City Police Department and get a job for $48,500. So I can't come out of law school with the law school debt, already knowing that I'm going to enter into a public service job that's, as Mr. Skandalakis said, none of us go in expecting to be paid a market rate for our work, but we do expect to be paid some valuable wage. And what's in statute right now is simply not that.
Yeah. So my question is this: is there, not to run rogue on the author, I guess the question is this an opportunity? This is really the thrust of what I was getting at when I was asking Mr. Skandalakis. If there's a minimum pay scale that has been adopted de facto across the state, do we want to take that minimum pay scale and specify that in statute here? And take the fact, we've not been in this code section, I don't think, in my time down here. Maybe we have. Do we want to go in, and do we want to, even if it's not on the fly today, do we want to kind of think about this and hard code that into statute so it's more than $38,124 per year for a public defender 1? I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to hijack your bill. I'm just asking the question parenthetically. It's something we want to do. So I'll recognize the author.
I think ultimately that's a appropriations decision. But if we're matching what's being appropriated, I think you could make that change here in this committee.
If there's a substantive impact, that this is stated as the lowest, I mean, if it's posted that way places, and this is kind of the walking around rate that's talked about, I don't know how relevant that is. I don't live in this space. I will tell you, I hire lots of young architects, and we're hiring young architects with bachelor's degrees coming out of school for more than JDs who've passed the bar are getting, right? So,
Mr. Chairman, I would be very hesitant to put that type of information into the code, simply because by doing so, when we do get adequate appropriations and we have the pay scale we have, and we can move people up within steps. There's classes and steps. It seems to me that you're almost tying our hands. And we don't advertise. When we advertise for a position as an assistant DA, we always say commensurate with experience, because once we get your resume and we see you've got 10 years, we know we can put you in a class 2, step 1, which is only $70,000. But my fear, and again, I want to talk to the CFO, my fear is if we put it in code, we're going to kind of limit what we can do within those parameters that we have. And obviously everything we do, everything the public defender does, and everything the prosecuting attorney's done is based upon appropriations.
Well, question I didn't ask before, but I thought about as I was reading this is there a guideline for public defender 1, 2, 3, and 4? Is that defined?
Yes, sir. If they are following, and I can't speak for Miss Ali and I can't speak for the public defender, but if they're following the same class and scales we are, then it's the same. Then yes, there is. It's defined within the pay scale that the prosecuting attorneys council adopts for incoming assistant DAs and for DAs to be promoted up the ladder.
Which to me though, just begs the question, if the criteria, the dividing line between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 is in rule, but yet you have a pay scale and statute, I mean, ultimately you're not building on a solid foundation of statute. Why is it even in statute?
Again, this is what Mr. Poston brought up, that it allows us to set the pay scale. Our statute that allows prosecuting attorneys council to set the pay scale.
But as we tie,
And we obviously have to show that to the legislature when we're doing that.
Mr. Chairman, I would just point out that there are numerous statutes that state what the salaries are for a lot of different offices, including judges, heads of departments, things like that. So they're all behind what the budget already carries.
True.
So it would be, I'm not sure how all that would work to try and update all of that.
and
Because if you're dealing with this, you're going to have to deal with that at some
I get the
point.
no less than, so I just want to make sure, so we have the no more thans, this percentage. So, because that's not a fixed number. I guess where we truly are can cascade down from there, but there is a cap of what can't be done. I don't know if this, again, do you think the General Assembly can't constrain itself in general law? I don't really know how we can really constrain this in this statute when we pass another statute that's the budget. I'm not sure there's any enforcement effect of this, so I don't really understand it. I don't know what effect this has, candidly.
I can't speak to that exactly either, but I did want to mention one other just point of information for you. I don't know if because I don't know the inner workings of GPDC, I can't speak to what their scales are. Like, I don't know if they have the same step and class system or not. I just don't know. But what I know is anecdotal, admittedly anecdotal, but we had a member of our organization this past fall in one of the more northwestern circuits, left the public defender's office there after 10 years, moved over to another circuit, neighboring circuit, took a job with the district attorney's office, lateral move for more than $10,000 extra in pay. So that may be a one-off. It may be an anomaly. I have no way to know or sort of prove that up. But it does give us some pause and concern that there is, as much as this body has, I know, endeavored over the past years, and Chairman Welch especially deserves a lot of credit for the parity that's come to the system with respect to pay for these public servants, there seem to still be some discrepancies. And I guess I understand, and I feel sort of caught between Representative Thorne and Executive Director Skandalakis, but there has to be some transparency somewhere, so that people can know that there is equity happening and parity happening, since that really is the intent and will of this body. And I don't know that that has to be statute, but it seems like it has to be somewhere, so that the men and women who might want to be public defenders, but now frankly can't afford it because they got to pay their daycare bill, and they can make 10 grand down the street still practicing criminal law, they're going to go do that. And we're going to keep losing good people.
Ms. Causey, for a $10,000 pay raise, would you become a prosecutor?
No, sir.
Okay. I thought I'd ask that.
I swear to tell the truth. And it has to be
That's
now.
right.
As much as I adore this one.
Okay, I think, again, I think I don't see any harm to what we're doing here to the author. I just wanted to take a tactical pause and say, is there some more good we can do while we're at it? You know, and so I'm not trying to, again, hijack your bill, but just wanted to ask the questions. Any more discussion from members committee? Anybody who didn't sign up who has been so inspired by the debate, they want to jump into this mix? Anybody? I'd like to recognize Superior Court Judge Kell. Welcome. From my neck of the woods. With that, Chair recognizes Vice Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to both, I'm totally in favor of increasing the pay of all these individuals right here. I am. But you'll see I'm a signer on this bill, and what I have seen in my home circuit, and there's probably other rural circuits that find themselves in this situation. David Smith, who is our chief public defender out in the Tallapoosa circuit, he is in court every calendar call. And a lot of these chief public defenders, they're basically doing the grunt work too. And so I think until we can find the money in our budget, which I hope we can, I think that it is prudent that we especially make sure that we're compensating these chief public defenders. I'm all on board, and I'll sign on to the bill for the pay raise on the other public assistant ADAs and assistant public defenders. But I think we find ourselves where a lot of the private criminal defense lawyers we have in our state now, they gain their experience at public defender's office, and even ADAs too. I mean, you have a lot of ADAs that come out, and so this is a great experience level, but that is becoming a tougher avenue to pursue with the increase in law school tuition. So I would say this: the chief public defenders we have right now, they've been in it for the long haul. They have done it for many years. They're not just there for the experience. They're committed to public service. So I'm sympathetic to that. I just think if we can do that this year, that's going to be a big help, especially back log of cases that we have in a lot of circuits. I'm glad to talk to our friend here that testified earlier. I was glad to hear that they're called up and they're doing well in his circuit. That was music to my ears and good for the criminal justice system as a whole. But for those chief public defenders, I think this is a very good step in the right direction.
Okay. So with that, what's the pleasure of the committee? A motion do pass from Vice Chairman Smith. Is there a second? Second. And a second. Any more discussion on the motion? Any online discussion? Hearing none. Any amendments? Any amendments to the bill? Okay, we have before us a motion do pass on HB 1391 LC version 280447. Hearing no amendments, all those in favor of sending it forward to full committee with a do pass recommendation signify by raising your right hand. Online? No. Okay. And with that, it passes. Thank you. And again, as if you came in late, we have HB 993 has been postponed to another committee meeting at the request of the author. So if there's nothing else from